Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Recall Network. My guest is Roger Hancock, CEO and founder of Recall InfoLink. Hello and welcome to the Recall Network. Today I'm talking again to Roger Hancock, CEO of Recall InfoLink. And we just kind of skipped the introduction part because I know everyone in my network and in his network, of course, is aware who he is, what he's achieved, and where he's coming from. So, welcome, Roger. I'm happy you took the time to do this interview with me today.
Thanks, Stephanie. Good to see you.
Thanks. So, today we're going to talk about Europe, of course, and the development there, what's going on. And we'll start with a little bit of a broader question. So, what do you think is the current recall situation in Europe? Do you see any specific developments there? What is your experience? What have you learned throughout the last couple of months?
Well, recalls happen in Europe just like they happen in the US, just like they happen in Asia. So it's still on my radar that recalls are happening there, and they're happening, as far as I can tell, in a disjointed way, similar to the way they run in the US. And because the supply chain is global, Europe gets drawn into recalls whether the problem starts in Europe or not. Just like the US gets pulled into some recalls that start in Europe, and Europe gets pulled into some recalls that start in the US. As long as there's imports and exports, there will be recalls that cross the pond. And thinking in terms of consumer protection and thinking in terms of brand protection and process simplification and standardization, all of those concepts that Recall InfoLink applies in the US can equally be applied to Europe. Perhaps even a little bit more so because of the different countries in Europe that have different standards. And, of course, Europe has tried to harmonize the countries in some ways through the food and feed transmissions that they do, where recalled products cross borders, and one country alerts other countries. There still is fragmentation that standardization could help reduce, again, all for the sake of protecting consumers. This is all about consumer protection.
Absolutely.
I mean, there is some business efficiencies. We make people's jobs easier. We make the recall process more standardized. But at the end of the day, recalls are about protecting people.
Yeah. So in general, you would also agree that there is not that big of a difference between the European way of handling recalls and the Northern American way? Or do you see a huge gap or a huge difference in how recalls are being handled?
Well, that's a great question, Stephanie. And I'm going to answer that question by saying Europeans tell me that the process for handling recalls is the same in Europe as it is in the US. Europeans look at our platform and say, yes, that works in Europe as well as it does in the US. Asians, I've been in Singapore and Taiwan. I've been in lots of places, and people all confirm, yes, that's how recalls are done. Now, of course, we're not talking about many detailed specifics like regulatory requirements and reporting requirements and those kinds of things. But the general principle that you remove defective product from the supply chain by notifying your customers and giving them instructions and monitoring their activity and creating a two-way communication so that there can be both information flow, confirmation, credit processing, all that stuff. It's the same process globally, as far as I've been made aware, and I've been doing this for a while.
Yeah, right. And that leads me directly to my next question. Standardization, you already talked a little bit about that, and data readiness. It's becoming more and more important and of interest, and people are more aware of the necessity of that. So where do you see the next steps for the industry in regards to those two topics?
Two topics, data and standardization.
Yes, and data increase.
Yeah, well, the two go hand in hand.
Mm,
Standardization has a broader umbrella coverage than just data. Data is part of recall standardization. But both need to happen together. If you standardize a process, say, okay, we're going to make this decision based on these variables and these metrics. And then if the decision is yes, we need to remove product from sale, we're going to take these actions to let these people know with these instructions. But your data isn't standardized with your customer's data or your supplier's data, then all that standardization work only goes halfway at the farthest to make the recall easier and faster and more complete. But if you say, okay, we're going to standardize the data that we provide to our customers, and we're going to standardize the data that we request from our suppliers so that our customers understand how to use the data that we're going to send them, and our suppliers understand our needs around data so they can send us the data that allows us to process their recall quickly. Then the two come together with common data and common practices. And the only way to ensure that prior to the emergency of being thrown into a recall is to practice. And practice can't simply be an internal set of workflows. You know, do we know how to do this? Do we know how to do that? Do we know how to do the third thing? It has to include your external trading partners. Because if you don't practice with them, then when you get into the middle of a recall, all of a sudden there are going to be gaps. Your customers don't know how to use, don't have systems that can accept the data that you send them. Or you don't know how to contact your customer in the way that they need to be contacted. Or your supplier doesn't give you accurate information to share with your customers. And so if you standardize the process and you say, okay, we're going to use standard data, but you don't tell anybody, then those standards only go as far as your business. So really it's standardize your process, standardize your data, and then practice. And there actually is an international alliance, the Alliance for Recall Ready Communities, that's about building those three components: a standard process, standard data set to exchange with trading partners, and then a practice module that brings those two together.
Mm-hmm. And based on all that knowledge and development that we've just talked about, how would you say Recall InfoLink's approach to the European market has changed or adjusted to those requirements? And let me just add a second part to that.
Sure.
Case. What kind of companies are interested in our service in Europe? What is your experience there? What kind of companies or partners, or where do you see Recall InfoLink heading for the next couple of months and years to come?
Yeah. Okay. Well, the second question, what kind of companies are interested? The first question, remind me, was where's Recall InfoLink?
How our approach has changed throughout the years and with all the different requirements these days. With
yeah. So I think that when excuse me, when we approached the European market the first time, GDPR was not quite yet enacted, and then it was brand new. So during the first segment, GDPR was a big unknown, and then it was new, and complying with it was unknown. So there were a lot of concerns about data and how GDPR was going to affect data. So there were a lot of concerns about cloud hosting of data and localization of data. So there were some technological questions that were real barriers to recall standardization. And then on top of that, there was there were some technological barriers, and then there was some comfort with doing something as important as a recall with a third party. And so there was a little bit of discomfort. We're going to do a recall and we're going to contain it ourselves. It's our business. Sharing information with a third party who's not involved, but is just a middle person carrying information. There was a lot of concern there. So I think both of those concerns have changed. I believe that there still is some residual concern about data, and I think that that is decreasing. Part of the decrease is as the workforce changes and people are more comfortable with using data and interacting with data, and they aren't quite as concerned about protection. And then that GDPR is well established, sets the rules for everybody. So everybody's comfortable with the rules that we play by. And so there's a lot more comfort around sharing data with other companies and using third parties. There still is a bit of unease, I think, I would say, about cloud hosting. It's not like it used to be, but it's still there. And the regular cadence of breaches happening in the cloud space kind of reinforce that. And there are fewer breaches now than there used to be. Some of the breaches, though, are bigger than they used to be. And so there's still a little bit of concern, but I think both of those things have been well addressed, partly because of GDPR, partly because of time, and partly because of the way the world has changed around data. When we started, Googling a question was a pretty established, but not institutionalized process. Now people don't think anything of Googling. It's all about chatting with your AI assistant to find out, what you need to be doing. So the whole world has changed. And I think that that's changed both sensitivities around data and around third-party companies processing data to help you manage a recall.
Absolutely. And the second part, which companies do you think are interested or are reaching out or are potential partners?
Yeah, it's an interesting question as well, because we find interest at all levels of the supply chain. We have found interest in manufacturers, we found interest in wholesalers, and we found interest from retailers. So I think a more typical description of who's interested is who has the concern about the public perception, the public health, the public protection as part of their cultural values, together with who is willing to do new things to address existing concerns, because processing a recall with standard data through a third party to your customers makes the whole process faster and easier. I mean, I could tell you story after story of how many thousands or tens of thousands of people get notified quickly, how many thousands of businesses and how quickly they respond. But that requires doing something new, something that you haven't done before. And so really it's companies that have this value of public health protection is important, kind of part of the food safety culture, and companies that also are willing to do new things to solve existing problems, because preventing recalls has been going on forever.
Right.
And recalls occasionally happen because something goes wrong. They're never planned, they're never expected, but they do happen. And so being willing to address an existing problem with a new solution is something that companies have to also be ready for. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to be talking to a company after this call who is going to tell me, now we're ready to solve this old problem in a new way.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're ready to use your service to access the advantages of a standardized technological system and the speed and the standardization that can bring us to solve this problem that we've been solving with paper and pencil for years and years and years.
Yeah.
And so, I know in Europe, there are even some industries, all industries have to be aware of recalls. Pharmaceutical industry in particular is similar to the food industry. The way recalls are handled in the pharmaceutical industry in Europe, in my opinion, is quite close to the company that I'm going to be talking to after this call. Today, they send out registered letters in the mail to process a recall. It takes days and weeks for that to happen. And they're going to transition to our service, which takes minutes and hours to happen. And they're going to abandon the paper. Well, I know that there are some pharmaceutical recall processes in Europe that still rely on paper and pencil and still take weeks. And you need somebody who's willing to say that existing problem can be solved in a better way if we're willing to do something new. So again, people who have concern about the public, their perception, their health, and people who are willing to try new things to solve old problems. When we find those two in the same companies, wherever they are in the supply chain and whatever industry they're involved in, those are the people that benefit first from the value of our service. And then over time, more and more people do it because others are. But gaining that kind of traction takes time.
Yeah. So my last question now, with me stepping down from my role at the GmbH, what is needed for partners, people of the industry, to get a hold and to be able to connect with you and benefit from our amazing service?
Well, first, let me say that we are very thankful for the time that you've spent with us. And we understand that life circumstances change and people have to change with it. In exactly the same way as I was talking about solving old problems with new solutions, things change. And so first I want to express great and deep appreciation and thanks for the work that you've done to establish a presence for us and a market awareness for our service. And then second, I would say, people can always reach out to me, and we will respond. We're going to be, of course, continuing the GmbH that's been founded. We'll find a new general manager. I'll be filling that role temporarily. But we have plans for continuing to push into the need that we see, because there are literally thousands of recalls that happen in Europe every year. Recalls, when people think about recalls, they think about it from their own context. And so they think about what the latest recall they saw in the news was, or when the last time they had to practice a recall, or when the last time they did a recall. Well, for most manufacturers, the last time they did a recall was years ago or never. And so they think recalls don't happen very often, they're rare. But when you put hundreds of thousands of suppliers together in a pot, and you stir that pot, there's recalls every day.
Yeah.
And so we're going to continue to press into that need, because companies who address the old problem with a new solution realize better consumer perception, continued trust in their brand, savings in both time and money and headache, and they get to sleep better at night. So we're still very optimistic about Europe. It's taken longer to begin operations there, serving clients, than we ever anticipated. But the whole recall process has taken longer. I mean, this whole process of recall standardization has taken longer.
Yeah.
So we're excited. Again, deep thanks to you for all the work that you have done. We wish you well in the new phase of your life. And we hope that this is a good transition for both of us.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been a wonderful time with you and everyone else on the Recall InfoLink team. I really enjoyed it a lot, and I appreciate everything I was able to achieve during that time in my life. And to all the listeners out there, no worries. There's just going to be a pause of the Recall Network. It will be, however, continued. And until then, please take a look at the website. Look out for the blog, for the newsletter. There is enough information out there for you to learn more about what's happening at Recall InfoLink. And they're always there for you. I know it's a great team. You get lucky to work with them because they are just amazing people. And it's always fun, and they are experts in what they're doing. So I highly recommend you get in touch.
Thank you, Stephanie. And let me also make one real quick plug. Even if you aren't ready to change the way you're processing recalls internally, if you're interested in the whole thought process of bringing standardization, there is an alliance that's doing this work, and you can read all about the alliance at Recall Ready Communities, recallreadycommunities.org. And if you're interested in participating, there's a button that says I'm interested in participating, and we will contact you, and there's no cost to participate except for an investment of about an hour a month to be engaged in the process. So recallreadycommunities.org is where you can find out more about the concepts that we've been talking about. So thanks again, Stephanie.
Well, you're welcome. And thank you for your time, Roger. Let's end this here. And I really appreciate you being here, talking to me, and sharing your point of view and your knowledge on how recalls are being handled and what the development is, where the development is heading in Europe. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
This has been today's episode of the Recall Network. Thank you for your interest and your attention. Goodbye.